So, hello everyone. I'm Dafydd James. I'm the head of digital media at National Museum Wales, and I'm here with my colleague Rheinallt Jones, who's a program manager for People's Collection Wales project, which I'll explain in a bit, and Tom Pert from the Royal Commission of Ancient and Historic Monuments of Wales. So we're all working on a project called People's Collection Wales, which is a program of work between culture and heritage bodies in Wales. And there are three main partners who are involved in the project: the National Museum, the National Library of Wales as well, and the Royal Commission, which I mentioned earlier, and is supported by the Welsh Government. And it's a website full of photographs, sound archives, videos, articles, and crucially, it's built so anyone can contribute material to it, not just the national institutions who are collaborating on it. And since launching, we've worked in collaboration with a number of different groups and individuals, and it's a really key aspect of the project where we allow the kind of creative use of our collections as well as the production of more content to the website. So, though the website is an important part of the project, there is a broader program which includes things like accredited training, digitization, community engagement, and we've also used the partnership as an opportunity to experiment with new technology as well. For example, we've done crowdsourced project for place names and historical OS mapping. We've experimented with 3D models and visualizations of those, and so on. So we kind of pilot these projects, as I said, as part of a partnership, and I think we actually learned from each other. Previously to the project, we didn't really get together to work on specific projects, so it's been really beneficial to us to learn from each other and different expertise as well. So those kind of pilots, we choose the ones that we've got the opportunity to do it, firstly, which is great, but we also choose the ones that show value and then scale them up and bring them into the core service as we're going along. For example, we've worked on historical mapping layers, so as part of the website you can explore items and see them in their historical context. And we've also created facilities for building heritage trails as well. Okay, so for this specific project, we've been using Lockley, which is a content platform for creating and interacting with iBEACONS. And the content is structured into cards, which Tom will go into later on, and they can contain pretty much any type of rich media. And then those cards are triggered by the beacons themselves, and we'll give you opportunities to trial it later. I'm not sure if anyone else on the panel is mentioning Bluetooth low energy, but I'm sure someone else has today. But basically, they transmit small packets of data that calculates the proximity of a device from those beacons. And those devices receiving an iBEACON transmission can then approximate the distance for, to exhibits, displays, and whatever you're working on. So there are a number of different beacons available as well. Yesterday we met someone who actually had a beacon the size of a quarter, or a 10p piece, which was really impressive. And in terms of practical considerations, these are really efficient, low energy as well. So not only does the phone keep its power well, but as opposed to things like GPS, but beacon batteries can last for ages as well. So my colleague Tom will take you through some practical examples.
Thanks, Dav. Now, if this works, I'm not a Mac person, so I'm hoping this will play. Oh yeah, sorry, there we are. Right, that's the first hurdle overcome, I think. Yes. So basically, we started getting into this iBEACON development around February this year. We got a few iBEACONs, had a look at the Lockley Platform, and the first project that we were able to produce. Is this play? Anyway, if you could see the video, what you would see is a fantastic, I'd barely need to speak because it really shows you what we did at the National Slate Museum in Llanberis. So we took 25 beacons, positioned them around the National Slate Museum, there we go. We used existing, 25 beacons. We used existing content, and a lot of it redundant digital content that had been curated 10, 15, 20 years previously, and had been curated and made available to the public through older technologies, wands and things like that, which actually since had fallen out of favour at the museum and weren't being used anymore. So this digital content wasn't available to people. We took the audio that had previously been curated, we took video, images, text, all of it from pre-existing sources, and put it into the Lockley system. And then the Lockley system also allows you to combine widgets along with this digital content. So you have a system of cards. So each beacon is a place in the system, and then each place can have any number of cards associated with it. And then a card can contain a whole range of multimedia and widgets. So the widgets can be word searches, they can be video players, audio players, as you saw, sort of interactive games to play with pupils. And even now we've got 3D capabilities, so you can drop in Colada 3D objects, make them interactive. We introduced a learning zone with quizzes, so that you were asked questions, you could feedback your answers. So it was used as an educational tool as well. This is an example of the quiz widget designed for pupils visiting the museum. It goes on. You can see the different areas where they were located. One of the neat things we've also got is a then and now widget. So you can take historical photographs and do a before and after, what it was like before, what it's like after. And the really interesting thing with the beacons is also that you can add other widgets, PayPal widgets, so you can monetize the things, get people to donate straight from the app. And also a really important element is that statistics are being gathered on visitor flow, visitor use, dwell time, all those sort of really useful metrics that will help you understand how your site is performing. We've also got time-enabled functionality in the cards, so specific offers and information can be deployed at specific time, pre-programmed. So, on a Saturday, offer people money off if they are at the cafe or whatever it might be, to help visitor flow around the site as well. I think we've probably seen enough. I'll skip it on now. Time is short. So basically, I'll just run through this really quickly. Step by step, how you create content on the platform. First thing you do is you set up a project, you give it a name, you set up your places, so you have to think, well, how many places do I want to talk about? Those are going to be the locations of your beacons. The next thing is to think about the content that you're creating for all those places. So for each place, you can create any number of content cards. You create your widgets using a third-party platform called Bookry, which is in on the Apple platform. And then you publish your cards. And then the final step, it's a 3-step process. You place and you calibrate your beacons. You calibrate them with the device itself, with an iPhone or an iPad. So you position your widget, your beacon, and then you step backwards to a sensible radius from where you want things to happen, and you say, I want something to happen from this point forward to that widget. And it's a really simple process of calibrating your beacons using that system. Then you download and test it, and then once you've tested it, you can choose to publish to the Culture Beacon platform. And it's a really simple system. You don't have to take my word for it. We've set up a trail this morning. After this session, if you'd like to see how it works, if you've got iOS devices, we'll give you a URL to download the app. If you don't, then you can come with us and we'll show you how it works. It's it's not the best content you'll ever see, but it's about the impact of Dallas and its heritage on me growing up in rural England. So we've got Vanilla Ice, we've got J.R. Ewing, a heavy metal band called Pantera. It's all the cultural highlights that have ever come from Dallas. So anyway, that's probably enough explanation about how you can pull things together. Oh, sorry. The last thing is images, video, audio, text, and widgets are a small element of what you can do. We've got all sorts of different content cards you can include. So quizzes, we've got widgets for Twitter, for Facebook, for iTunes, Google Earth, you name it, RSS feeds, full web pages, they can all be incorporated into the platform. But probably the more interesting thing to talk about is the way that you can use analysis and use interactivity and program it into the platform. And I'll hand over to Rheinallt to talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks so much, Dafydd. Pretty much what Tom was saying, the story so far, I'll come to the microphone now, is very much the sense that February, we had a few beacons. Does it work? Towards then, in April, we launched just to the local, some communities and so forth. Towards then, July, we went live, and then the stats we're getting back from it. But as Tom was saying, this is the very important part of the new added value that we saw in iBEACONS, was the extra data that we had. And within that, not just the number of downloads, although we've got that, not just the number of access to content, although we've got that, it's then the level of participation and the number and the qualitative aspect as well. And again, if you bring all those together, it's fantastic, especially as you saw with those learning aspects. So you're asking people what have they done in the moment, or how they feel, or whatever questions put forward. So it's very much the approach we took was, what's the added value of this technology for the place we're in, which is the National Slate Museum, and how we can scale it further as well. So within that, it's using the rooms and the beacons and then calibrating, and well, not calibrating, but then as you would do a web page in one way, but ensuring then that those learning zones you saw allow the individuals to go around, transmit the content from the beacons, but also ensuring that you have one beacon, but potentially an infinite amount of cards under one app. So that's quite new, that really is. So it's mainly thinking then, well, okay, so what do we start doing with this? So we've started to play, and it is play and explore. But then as we do, as Dafydd showed, we're always looking towards what's the risk and the innovation and therefore the benefit that could come to us. So as we learn, as things work, then we implement and go through. So I'll come to, I'm sure to say silver bullet once or twice today, but we didn't see it as a silver bullet, it's just seeing how could it work. But this is one example, as you can see here, of the discourse in the National Slate Museum. Is very much the strike, and for those who are for it or not. So by the time they come to the end of where the houses are, there's a value towards having an interactive classroom activity where they can go to one side of the room, which is a large room, if they're for the strike, the other side if they're against it. So as they do this, when they go for the strike, then they get access to sets of cards that'll be different to those who are against it. That's great, that's a new way of working. So if they're for the strike and they'll go, well, go for a loaf of bread to your local shop at that time, and it'll be, well, you can go there, but you can't afford anything because you're on strike and so forth. So those different cards that you can use and take forward. So it's a new way of working. But again, those stats we're learning. So people have interacted, and then taking the physiological aspect of moving about and so forth. And then the other aspect, and this is really interesting in the sense of how these are changing. It's mainly seeing that you're in the same space, but then we have different, and we take the learning aspect in here as well. So they've enjoyed learning about the discourse of the strike and the slate and everything else. But then you have educational audiences coming in who purely want to teach the numeracy values that you can do in there and see the values. So we're developing a set of cards that's purely for that. So they just download that underneath the one app. And as they do, as we can put forward here, the maths teacher comes in for that room or for that class in the museum, then he arrives, and therefore then what you have, maths cards coming up on their devices, because that's the way the maths he or she is transmitting to go through. The same then the history comes in. So same space, same pupils, different teacher, could be the same teacher. But coming in then the history cards come through. So again, same space, but different content. So that's what we mean. And the same as we have a huge amount of engineering interest coming in with steam engines and so forth. They're not really interested in the slate, but they are in others. No problem. set of cards. It's under there, one app, you get it. And then we get the stats, who's seeing it, who isn't, and so forth. New way of working. So within that, taking it forward then to thinking, and Tom touched on it, there's not just the space calibration, and you can set, when I stand here, it's triggered, and the information comes towards me, I access, that's great. You've also got a time level and algorithm you can fit in here as well. So you can say, and we have them, in the canteen, when you're standing there, this is the old canteen where the miners used to eat, then there's information that comes to you. You get the information here there. So the curators put forward that usually people hang around there for about 5 minutes. So after that, they go. But if they stay, they're probably engaged or there's something going on that they're not in control of. So within that, what we're seeing is that we know they've been there for 5 minutes and therefore, bang, the beacon's triggered to the app, to the server, more information. Would they like to learn more about how this space, 120 years ago, evolved into the discussions about what the modern trade unions now believe in and so forth? So that's great, so they can have it. And another one, so you can stagger information over time through the beacon. And again, all that information. So we're getting some depth then of some people that engage themselves. We know how long they're staying, how they're not, and so forth. So this one, we've got a lot to play with, really, towards ensuring that we do get this right, the data feedback coming back. But also, we can associate this to the different cards as well. So we might see that those interested in STEAM engineering just want 1 minute here, 1 minute there, it's different audiences. But we can, it's not so much as sitting down and having good senior management meetings and saying, well, we think this, the curator thinks this, and let's have a go. It's more towards, well, we thought this, and the data's come back saying, nobody's accessing it, so what are we doing? So you have to change and so forth. So that's the level there. But we're taking it further as well. So this is introduced to Pert. Great guy, and a huge amount of wealth of knowledge about the foundries in the area, that he's done it on an amateur basis, but also he's on duty. He's actually a carpenter, but he's also on duty on the grounds of the Slate Museum itself. So what we're seeing is that many people come when they see to him, they see the badge, so it's an identifier. Sometimes they ask him questions, sometimes they don't. Every time he wants to impart his information, he likes that type, the kind of job, so he's there. So we've got now, he's got a beacon in his pocket. So when he's on duty, he's on. And therefore then, bang, the cards are about, and then his picture comes up and says, I'm on duty, I'm here, and I have this information to have. So again, those people are going, not interested, I'm for a scone and a cup of tea, so I'll be after the cafe. But those who are, they'll see him about. So again, it's the proximity of where they are, and that's how we can change as well into that aspect. So it's coming back to the theme. So there's a lot of different things we can work there. We're getting data back. So again, any innovation. So as we did with the web pages, mid-90s, they're forward. Do they work? Do they not? Who's accessing everything else? Designs, development, HTML, whatever the context we started to develop. The same we're seeing now with proximity aspect. So we're not saying it's just beacons on near frequency. Oh, is it? No. It's together. So we've now got an access to the iBEACONS themselves that you don't have to be online. You have to download it, of course, the app, and also the initial contents. But once that's done, then it's just triggered by the beacons. And also, when you come back, we get the data coming through, anonymized as well through that. So what we've got then is we took half a day just to show, really, more than anything else, but it came towards more, well, they learned quite a bit as well, of using the Lockley CMS, the content management system, for the local community in the Hŷn Peninsula. It doesn't matter where it is, really. But within there, you had a local museum, a good local history, and also tourism, like hotels and so forth, and lovely walks. So within just 2 hours of sitting down with them and showing them the system, 2 weeks later, they had an app ready to launch. It's done. We've got a video. I'm not showing it today, but we can show it after. So they'd actually use it. They'd just use the content they'd already had and then put it all together and put it forward. So what we started to think about, and this comes back to the whole thing, we started small with 2 beacons. We did go for the launch, and that's done, coming back. But then we thought, hold on, so this could be scaled. So that's why we look for the culture beacon. So we're looking towards seeing the output of not just having a plethora of numerous apps there, some good, some bad, certainly no control necessarily. So there's an avenue that we can go down, that there is some form of framework and quality standards for publishing. So you can publish on the Lockley platform, whatever. So it's the Wild West in one way. But then if you wanted to say, make sure that it works within the culture beacon, we're making sure that you can use it towards a quality standard. So we're talking and working with the University of Leicester to see how that can be developed. So that's a great way of doing it with the framework. But also, and I'll end more with this one now, the added benefit you've got is the cross-marketing. So then when the individual walks out of the Slate Museum, we can then start to put some data in, knowing that they've walked out, they've been to the Slate Museum, there's a train service, it's nothing to do with the museum itself, it's part of the local authority, but there's partnership working there. So it suggests that there's a train going, there's a beacon by the train itself, it shows the waylay, the route it goes through, so it could be a promotional aspect there, so it's there. So the same way then, if they've downloaded the app once, wherever they go, and the beacons are transmitting, then it'll pick it up. So the same as Spotify, wherever else you've got, comes up with a nice little message just in the front. And it says, so you engage or not, you can go in or you can opt out. So the same as local councils want to put them on statues, or if you put them in the train station as you get off, the culture beacon then transmits. And that's the big change that we've got, is in the sense that it allows you then to have an omnipresent broadcasting and transmission aspect, not just having to opt in all the time. So if you're engaged, then you can actually scan for the transmissions and they can come through. So I won't go too much into this because I know we haven't got time, and I'm going to get that in a minute. But mainly what we've got is that these are just models from Ross Parry's work. So you've probably seen these before. What's a localized, centralized, on visit, off visit, on site, online, what you do before, after, and so forth. But with the proximity base, with the iBEACONS, we need a new one. So the same quadrants, but really it covers them all. So there's a lot of things we want to look at in the sense of the framework and the theoretical aspect. And I will finish on this one. What we're saying is that we're looking to this as a browser for the real world. So it's linking it then to the Internet of Things, and then trying to see then, as the objects that we've provided, how that can be taken forward. So that's why what we've got now is a scalable model through the Culture Beacon. You can use it, you can download it, you can have a go and everything else on the Lockley side. But what we're seeing is the added benefit. And I'll finish with, it's not a silver bullet. You get your beacons and you can put them about, that's fine. It's the same, you can get a web page, you can put that up. But you've got to think about what's the added value, what's the output, what's the key performance indicators and the measures aspect of it as well. Finish there. Thanks.
That was very impressive, Steve. I've been in a lot of fast-talking MCN presentations, but I think there's a winner. We do have time for some questions for our Beacon team. Questions? Yes.
I have a question. So when you were talking about a history teacher coming,
Oh, yeah?
Do they just get all of the prompts and then they pick the one that says history, or?
No, there's the dedicated cards. So when you go in, it says, looks for cards nearby. So cards nearby. And there's a list, and then you can see. And then in the UK, we've got these very technical terms for educational audiences, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3.
Okay.
So a history teacher knows the group he or she is with, and therefore see Key Stage 2, history. Oh, I'll go for this. But what we've got also is, usually that would have done pre-visit. They've done the planning. If they haven't, it doesn't matter, it's there. So it's a list and a menu of service. So it's, again, different towards the app, where you'd have to download the app beforehand, or you download the different app for that as well. It's just the cards to go through themselves. So same with numeracy or the other maths aspects as well. So it is, that's with the quadrants really. There is the pre-visit planning you can do. People do it, teachers do some of them. But if you don't, then the proximity covers it as well. So you're just thinking, what is about me now? Well, what is the information that's there? So and history is one of them. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Beacons? I know there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of you here, so maybe processing. Yes?
Who developed the software? I admire your interaction design the way you guys rock it. Who developed this?
Oh, it's a company called Lockley, who, we formed a kind of partnership with earlier in the year and used as a technological concept, and have seen it through since then.
Where are they at?
They're in Wales as well.
North Wales. North Wales.
6 miles away.
Yeah. So.
And the reason we took them as well, just to say that they were the only ones about at the time. Though that's one of them, still are. But also because we do everything bilingually, Welsh and English. So we had that. But also the good thing about this as well, you can do it multilingually. So it's all there as well. In that sense, we do the Germany bit.
I'm curious about I'm curious about the type of beacons that you're using, what brand you're using, and it's like, I know they're adhesive, a lot of them.
Some of that.
They're outside.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Different ones, and that's evolving probably, or progressing within that evolution. And we've got some to show you now. The ones we've ordered so far. So the estimate people have seen. And they do the deal, and they're $99, and you get 3 and a bit of firmware and all that to go through. Nothing wrong with that. That's good. But then what do you do afterwards? So what we've got here is that we can use any. So we've gone for the ones that are waterproof, and there's a hole in them, so we can put a nail in, and we can put them in places of high humidity outside. But at the beginning there was very few, but now there's more and more. Majority from China now as well. So within that, the price every month now is coming down. So the competition's coming through. But yeah, we've gone for the most waterproof ones. And also there's bits, you've got to calibrate them. So we had to do like this in the beginning. It's a bit of a pain. So we've done that this morning. And you could do it. It's a bit technical, and we need to lower the barriers in the sector we're in. But now they're coming out all calibrated. So a lot of that work's been done before.
And they're also becoming better in terms of battery life and improving the ranges as well.
Another question? Yes?
So this is all using API. Do you have to do developer created SDK?
It's a content management system that they provide.
I'm saying
Sorry.
for the software developers who work on these beacons, so that you work with other applications, is that all API that
Yeah.
you created to the developer?
Yeah, it can be API integrated. It can be web-based. That's the one we've used mostly to gain access. But also, it can be integrated to the framework folders of the
Network
site itself.
drives for
Yeah,
for the organisation. So you can map them to network drives even. You can even send emails with content in them to the content management system.
That's one thing we're looking, say, with we've got a learning officer at the State Museum, and the way that she was evaluating a lot of stuff was getting forms that were leaflets that were filled in and saying things and putting those in and collating. Now she's got a direct email from the online aspect, seeing who's doing what, when, and all that to go through. So that's linked through the system itself.
We have time for one more question for Team Wales before we move on? No. All right. Luckily, they were speaking very quickly. All right. Our next presenter, Sean. You guys are awesome. Sean Redmond, New York Public Library.
What are the chances the displays are going to be right? Oh, all right. Hi, I'm Sean Redmond. I'm the front-end lead at the New York Public Library in the Digital Experience Group. Before this position, I worked at the Guggenheim, the American Museum of Natural History, and the Brooklyn Museum, so I've been around the museum sector for a while. So here's the advertised title of my talk. I was finishing up at the very last minute of the submission part, so it's a little bit of a panic title. When you really got to get it in 30 seconds, as you do, you kind of just pull a quote from William Shakespeare and throw that on there. But like something better to call it might be something like "Pages doesn't live here anymore." So what I'm going to describe is how we took a pretty important but honestly pretty boring part of the New York Public Library website and turned it into something that's more of a service, and what that means to be a service and to move from pages to a service. So the digital experience is often the first step in accessing a service. So that's anything somebody wants to do. So in this case, we're talking about branches and finding a branch in this example. And you're going to go to the website, and we want to think of this as already starting to do it. Right? You're not reading about it. You're not preparing to do it. You're doing it already. Now, on cultural institution websites, we all know we have tons and tons and tons and tons of pages because we just have so much stuff to write about. Pages are really good at delivering unstructured information, and they make a perfectly good last-ditch effort for other kinds of information. You think of phone books worked great when there was nothing else, but now that there's something better, we don't print phone numbers in books anymore on pages. So we don't need to do that. Most information doesn't deliver you the service, right? So there's a difference between finding a phone number in a phone book, having to go to your phone to dial it, versus just calling up the number on your phone and calling that person right away. So that's the difference between information and a service. And again, as cultural heritage, cultural institutions, we just have so much information. It's really hard to fight the impulse to push back at people's requests to just get that information in front of people's faces. But when you're trying to make something that people can do or that people need access right away, we really need to start looking at moving from things that are page-based to things that are service-based. Just to have a definition, let's say a service is something that you can start right now. So I'm not reading about it. I am doing it right now. I might be doing it online. I might be doing it in an app. I might just be planning to do it. If I'm planning to go somewhere and I'm looking up the address or I'm finding when it starts, I'm already doing it. That's something I can start right now. So to distinguish between service and background, maybe, just look at an example. So from New York, so here's the MTA website. Here's the page for the A train. There's a schedule and stops there. A trains, most of these lines have been around 100 years now. There's, A train has its own song. There's so much to say about this train that, of course, the MTA has got their little thing that you can read about it. Of course, they don't, right? This is something obviously I just photoshopped in from Wikipedia, right? So the MTA site only has the schedule, because that's what you need when you're going to ride the train. The A train is a fascinating train line. The history of the New York subway is great, but you're not interested when you're trying to catch the train, and that's probably not a good time to get people interested. MTA has a great museum, the New York City Transit Museum. Everybody should go if you're in New York. But when you're trying to catch a train to get there, you really don't care about this. Whoops. So that leads to something I invented this morning called the ladder of serviceality. So static pages let you find the answer to the question that you're trying to answer. Dynamic pages will say they give you the answer up front, right? It knows a little bit more about what's going on. It can just give you that answer. Honestly, pretty much everybody's at least at this point for things that are important or that change a lot. A service delivers you a thing. Right, and the extreme limit is if you're on Amazon and you're going to buy something, doing that online delivers you the thing to your house. In a library, we don't quite do that, but you can place a hold, and we will fulfill that request when you come to the library to pick it up. So sometimes you can start doing something. You may have to go to complete it somewhere else, but the digital beginnings are still part of delivering that service to you. You want to think of them all together. So let's look at what we were faced with. So here's, I know it's kind of small, but there's a lot of information on it. So here's the page we started with, our location section, we call it. List of branches. Google Map, like you'd expect, you can't really do much with it. There's tabs for research libraries and boroughs. You can click on those, and there's a nice but really pointless jQuery animation to fade one in and one out. There's a lot of being able to find information on this page. You mostly have to look over the list for the thing that you want to find. Looking at a page for a particular branch, in this case, so here's our flagship building, the Schwartzman building, where we're lucky enough to work, 42nd and 5th Avenue. So you're interested in this building, and you come here, and it's still a lot of finding. There's a little bit of giving. There's hours there. There's a blue highlight on the day that it is, right? That's the example of giving you the information. When's it open today? Look in the blue cell of the hard-to-read table. There's events. That's something that's giving you some information, what the upcoming events are. You don't have to look through a list of events and figure that out. But it's pretty uncompellingly presented. We've got all the usual hallmarks of a museum or library page. You've got your top nav, left nav, right rail. This is a Drupal site. You could probably tell that, we're looking at it for half a second. But one point about the left nav I want to make is if you have a left nav, if you even give people the option of having a left nav as a way to surface what they want to talk about, you're putting yourself into a world of content hierarchy and not interaction, right? You're saying a left nav is essentially a way of finding the other pages you want, right? Here's a list of other pages, pick the one you like, go there. And you're probably losing out on a lot of things you could be doing otherwise. So some of that content, behind each of these pages, there's probably hundreds of other pages. Not so much for our neighborhood branches, but certainly for this one. So each one of these things is the tip of a content iceberg that we have to somehow help you find your way through. So the About page. Okay, so here's the building. I mean, this is kind of the About page, right? But there's more about content here. So that About page, that's the history of the A train, right, in this analogy. So, okay, in the left nav, there's an About link. There's also part of the About page on this page, right? So there's the text. And if you didn't get it by now, there's another link to the About page, right? So the thing that this page is pushing the most is reading that About page, which is like the history of the A-Train, probably not the thing you want if you're looking to come to the library and do something specific. And we look at the About page, again, more paragraphs. At the end of a lot of these paragraphs, you'll see a Read More link. And if we want to give this name a pattern, right, we call it the teaser and more pattern. Right, here's the beginning of the page you're looking for. We're not going to give you the whole page, but you got to click through to get it. The only thing that you can really do on this page is a big bold link in the middle where you can download the PDF of a print thing that's distributed in the branches. Right, so this is really pages upon pages upon pages upon print pages if you go to the branch and pick it up. Now go back. So there's the URL of the page. I wish. This was its real URL, and this is a good one. Other pages in this, this section had TID, some number / node, and then some other number. So any of you that have a Drupal site know we're revealing the internal mechanics of Drupal here. And I show this because, on the one hand, this section's trying to be dynamic. It's also overwhelmed with static content, and I think there's a collision there between these two ways of doing things. And you can see it here in developer exhaustion of trying to deal with this, where they just kind of gave up and are just using internal Drupal ID numbers rather than going that extra step. They just couldn't do anymore to make that a good SEO-friendly, human-readable URL. Our information architect, some of you probably know, Morgan Holzer, can like Rain Man, if you give her a number, she can tell you what branch it belongs to because she had to look at all this content. It's a very scary party trick. Okay, so returning to the idea, service is something you can start right now, like a trip to the library. Also, a service does not include everything there is to know about a service. Right, so this was the thing we were trying to establish. All this information, which is good and useful and interesting and necessary, if you can't find something about the A-Train, where are you going to go to find out about it? You're going to go to the library. So we're the library already, so we can't get away from this. But we don't have to put it in the service. We can try and find other places to find it, but we have to define what that service is. Okay. So how do we start to make it better? Content audit we had to start with, looking at what the pages we had and figuring out what they were. User surveys. We put a SurveyMonkey link on this part of the website. In a very short amount of time, we had hundreds of answers from users about what they thought was important, and we could start telling what they were looking for. A similar staff survey by email, so we could see from the staff perspective what they thought was important for their patrons. Card sorts, usual UX, information architecture stuff. I say we did all this, but at this point, this was still all Morgan's work. So this was all the preparatory stuff we had to do just to figure out what we wanted to do. It was an incredible amount of work. So some card sorts online, some in person. We just listened to staff. We'd go out, talking to people, stakeholder interviews, or just informally, and just finding out from them things that weren't necessarily in the surveys, or just as we talk more, like what are the things they deal with, what are the things they hate dealing with. What did people ask? Finally, it came down to me able to do wireframes and putting together a content plan. And the content plan was necessary here because there was so much content to deal with that we had to figure out what to do. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to start work on what we came to call the Loganider. Started as a joke name for what we were doing, but actually I found giving it a name really helps because it's a lot easier to talk about things that do or don't belong in the Loganider when you're talking about it like an app, than it is to talk about things that do or don't belong in the location section, right? Because anything can go in a section, right? The section is just kind of a bucket, but a Loganider is a thing. It does something, and it's an app with better just cognitive boundaries for just talking about it. So giving things a name like this, turns out it helps. Nitty gritty. We stuck with our Drupal backend, right? That's where the data was. Like, that was fine. We added some things, we changed some things, we took some things out, but we're still just using Drupal for maintaining the information the way people had done for years. But we took that data, exported it to another server where we made that data available via an API, like anybody would in 2014. And then on top of that API, we built a a front-end JavaScript web application, basically a one-page web app in Angular. And it's like any other one-page app that you see in the new HTML5 world. The only real difference is that we did this as part of a bigger site, and that's going to be kind of a challenge and something that maybe people don't expect so much. But none of this is controversial. Using Drupal as a backend, but not as a front end, like now is kind of a thing. People call it headless Drupal, so like, there's nothing new here. It's just the way that we approached it. Okay, so what do we end up with? So here's that new front page. It's not actually incredibly different. It's more nicely designed. It's more, it's minimal. It's got a lot of white space, bigger fonts. We still have the list of branches. You can still find the information if you want to find it. But you see this search box up at the top. The difference is that it's really built around that search box, and it's built around giving you the information instead of making you find it. It's all, it uses Google Maps API. We'll use your location if you're on a mobile device. There's, lots of ways to help you get to a branch that you're looking for. Just for example, here I've typed City Hall, it's gone to Google Maps and got the latitude and longitude there. We can show you, we can give you the branch that's closest to City Hall, right? That's all you have to do. Now, once we had this working, it was one of the interesting things that it changed some things that we thought we had down already. If you search for something that matched the branch name, originally we would bring that branch to the top of the list, give it a different color coding, so it's sort of like a promoted search result. Then you can click through to find it. But once the geolocation, everything was working, good and strong, that seemed like too much. That seemed like a step that you didn't need. We weren't giving it to you fast enough. So we toyed around with, giving you suggestions, but now it seemed really necessary. So here I've typed grand. We have 2 branches that have grand in their name. And so right away, we're giving you the options of things you might be looking for. And even you can just hit enter if you're happy with Grand Central and go right to that branch. And even the view on map links, the thing you might want to do right now is just look at it on a map. So there's even this fractal nature to that right nowness. We want to let you find the branch you're looking for right now. But within that task, once we sort of get a hold on it, we realize there are other things within that we also want to let you do right now, like making all those paths much shorter. So this was the original page for the Schwarzman building. And here's the new page, which we just think looks much better. We've gone from that tiny, decades-old picture of the building. We got all new photography because we just wanted it to look better. We put all that right now information up at the top. So if you need to know if it's open right now, right, we will tell you in big letters that it's open today until 6 p.m. Right? Easier to read the hours if you're looking for another day. Address, you can get directions. A very new thing we're able to do are these highlighted amenities, where we can tell you right now if it has like the thing you're going there to use. It's got books, but it also has electrical outlets you can use. Like you might really care about that. You can go and look at other things that the buildings have. And we have for the first time in another part of this app a way that you can pick the thing you're looking for and find all the branches that have it. So if it's the thing more than the place, we can satisfy that too. And even as preparing this slide, some of the things you can do right now, you can reserve a computer online. And when I had this slide, first presentation, I think, we should really put that link right here. Like we're making you click to another view so you can, click a link to reserve the computer. And that's something that I would kind of rather you be able to do, right now. That we just deliver you that service right away. The next slides are scrolling down the page, so it's still pretty pagey. But I'm going to point out the things that are more servicey about it. So beautiful pictures of the divisions. In this building, it's important that there are a lot of research divisions, and you want to know that. These featured things I'm going to return to in a second. We're going to look at more of the events. So here's the events. The previous version didn't have any descriptions or anything. We have to work with staff on shorter descriptions, so you can fit more on a page. But, a more sense of what's going on. But you see there's the blue registration online link. Now, if something requires you to register for an event, you can do it right here. That's a whole nother service. Like events are a service of their own. So you've been in one attempt to access the building. I want to get to the library. I want to go there. Maybe you're going there to attend this event, but we're starting to give you access to that service right here. Right? We can deliver you your event registration right from this page. We've been thinking more about like what do you want to do right now. So at the bottom, we have a lot of great bloggers. Blogs are kind of across. It's just a page you want to read, but it's the thing you do. If you want to read the blog, we can give that to you right now. There's our old friend, the about text, right? So here we're back to the teaser and more pattern, but the important thing is that if you click learn more here, and also those features are on the previous slide, they all go out to different places. So this Loganider app is really reserved for the data and the information that we can give you right now about the library and the library branches. If you want to read more, we actually send you out to a new, whole completely separate about section where we've collected all that A-Train history stuff in one place. And these are just pages. We don't have that collision of trying to make something that's a data-oriented app combined with an information-oriented section. So we just pull them apart. They work together well. Like the Find Out More link goes back to the Loganider. Here's that About page from the old version in the new location section. You can still get to the print PDF if you want. But now we're back in the world of left navs and right rails. But we've got all the room in the world, and we're not going to conflict with the service that we're trying to deliver. What's on the right, interestingly, is delivered from the Loganider. It's a little widget we built for ourselves to pull in the information we already had about the branches in this About section. So not only was it a service for the visitors, but it really became a service for us, too, to build out other parts of the site. And so where was the effort in this? And this is, I think, an important point when you're dealing with content-heavy sites. Here's a little wedge, actually coding the front-end app. Thousands of lines of JavaScript, as many lines of JavaScript that are just automated tests to make sure it's working right. Maybe a little bit more was building out the API and dealing with Drupal and getting that data in a source we needed. All the rest was dealing with that content. And I honestly say, if that's anything, that's an underestimate. If it took us who own the content and have all the people around who can tell us what it's involved, if it took us that much effort to figure out the content, you can only imagine what it takes for visitors to figure it out. So combining the locations finder with all that extra information just wasn't working. But the front end, once we had that service stripped down to what it really was going to be, was really pretty quick to create. So I'll tell you, a well-designed service, right? You can sit down ahead of time and decide, what does this really need to be? What can we cut out of it? What are the things we want to focus on? A well-designed service is easier to create and easier to maintain. So when you're talking to your directors, that means it costs less to implement, and it's got a better return on investment. Because we were just spending so much time keeping all those old pages up to scratch. And designing the digital end of a service can really help you design the physical end too, right? We want to think of these things all together. Someone's starting on the web, but they're going to finish in the library. They're starting on the web, but they're going to finish in the gallery. And it's not they're finding out about what they're going to do later. They're doing it right now. They're just going to complete that thing later. So as an example, a real problem we were having was hours. So in our buildings that have multiple divisions and multiple reading rooms, they all were opening and closing at different times. And we're really struggling with how do we make it perfectly clear to anybody they have to be very careful about the hours and know when something might be closing at an unexpected time. And we kicked that around for a while, and then we realized that, wait, that's the wrong solution to the problem. The problem is the hours. And we pushed back, and we said, you cannot have these crazy hours. We cannot make that understandable. There's no design solution. There's no coding solution for this. The only other solution would be to give everybody a personal attendant to follow them around and make sure they knew when something was going to close. So we said, we really need to change these hours somehow. And then one day, Morgan sent me this picture. She'd been to a meeting about this. And then, so here's the analog, the old school solution to the problem. We at least got them to agree that all closings were a quarter before the hour. So that at least reduces the cognitive load of figuring all this out. You just have to remember the 7 or the 5, basically. And so here, working on this digital service, but thinking of it as a part of the whole service that someone was going to be accessing until they left the library, changed the way we're doing business and made it a lot easier on our visitors. And I think that's the new ergonomics right there. So thanks. There's the link if you want to try it out. And but don't try the geolocation because you're more than 25 miles away from the library, and we'll just tell you we're not even going to try.
I was alerted by Dale that I could hand this around talk show host style. So does anybody have some questions for Sean? I can hand this to you. No questions. But the New York Public Library did something perfect. No.
As always.
Hi, this is fascinating. Thank you very much. I just want to ask you, do you have any other plans for creation of other services, and which content would that be?
Sean, I have to go to the microphone.
No, I have to go to this microphone.
Because I like the idea of moving away from the pages, but it feels at the moment you have 2 different approaches.
So just about anything. At the library, we obviously have a lot of things that count as services, more probably than a lot of museums. But events is a good one, and events are the next thing that we're going to tackle. That's just a big issue on the website. But we keep talking about things, and we say we need a something-inator. And that's become our shorthand for that. So we need, next thing is the eventinator. Then there's the staffinator. Then there's the subscription database-inator. Like all these things where it's, not information about something, but the thing that you can actually start doing. We're going to be, working on that. So yeah, there's lots of different areas. The next big one is events. I think it's a more obvious one. And one that's across the board for all these institutions. Letting people find things easier, sign up now, buy tickets. That's also got a lot more to do with fulfilling that need on the other end, right? You're going to show up, like, do we need to check you in? Do we need to record that you were there? So do we want to invite you to other things afterwards? So there's a lot more scope for this treatment with events. This is where we started. Morgan and I were both new, so it was a good place for us to learn about the institution. So it was one of the motives for starting that.
Is there another question? Oh, good, right here. Excellent.
Just to be convenient. Sean, thank you. That was fantastic. I was just wondering, what are you doing about an accessible fallback for the web app?
That is slightly a challenge. We're pretty fortunate that we have in our system the Andrew High School Library. Colloquially, we call it the Library for the Blind, but it really, it's not its true name. So we have people on staff who deal with that all the time. We actually have I forget what her title is, but someone whose job it is to advocate for the blind. And we had one meeting where we sat down with her and had her walk us through using JAWS, which is one of the screen readers when we make available for the library. Show us what it was like using this and how people use it. We did make some changes. So like the list of locations on that front page, we just had as a list. And she really pointed out that was hard. It was hard for people to traverse with a screen reader if it wasn't a table. So we made it a table, which was pretty difficult because making it a table but also responsive the way we wanted was hard, but we did do that. And so we had that one meeting, and we learned a lot, and we implemented some lessons from that, and that's just a continuing process.
Through the web app.
Sorry?
Through the web app.
Yeah.
You're not offering a static page that they don't.
Not if we can avoid it. because I'd rather, that will just end up not being maintained. So the more that we can keep in one place, the better. Angular is not as bad as you would think about this, and screen readers are much better at dealing with dynamic content than they used to be. So there's a lot of tricks we have to learn to make it work really well, but it's not, when we started down this road, when I first thought, I was like, oh, it's going to be so inaccessible, we're going to have to maintain like the old version anyway, which we did for Google. There's an SEO version of all these pages, which was simpler than it would be for making something useful for people with screen readers, but it wasn't as big of a problem as we thought, but there was still learning to do.
One more question? Okay, thank you, Sean. Our next panelists are Brinker and Dale.
Thank you. So the title of this presentation comes from a professor of mine at the University of California, Donna Haraway, in her 1985 book, A Cyborg Manifesto. The book is about cyborg feminists who enter into this hyper-mediated relationship with society and technology in which collaboration across digital networks are common. On its almost 40th year anniversary, Dale and I will consider what a 2014 cyborg conservator could be. I first asked Dale to be part of this presentation because he was in many ways the catalyst for this project. Last spring at Museums in the Web, Sarah Bailey Hogarty and I presented on the restoration of an 18th century French period room at the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, where the public could watch museum conservators work on traditional gilding and carving techniques through what we affectionately called the fishbowl room. During the Q&A, Dale asked a pretty straightforward question about how the conservators were interacting with the public and explaining the reasoning behind their methods. While I hope it wasn't obvious on the outside, internally it felt very much like, oh crap. So over the course of the past 5 months in our free time, we have been brainstorming, prototyping, and trying to understand how conservation labs could become more transparent, inviting many different publics into the findings and assessments of object preservation. Our goals were to investigate ways that integrated image-based digital technologies might improve the value of communication, to design practical digital platforms where technical information can be collected, shared, archived, linked, searched, and discussed in real time, to integrate wearable heads-up display and augmented reality technologies for viewing, comparing, collecting, and sharing data, to expand access and interaction with these platforms beyond the professional conservation circles, and also to empower participatory decision-making and broaden public support for how, when, why cultural heritage is preserved, and finally, to gain a better understanding of the relevance and social impact of museum objects on contemporary communities. Our aim is not to offer a complete solution, but rather a series of ideas, point out a few blind spots, and suggest that there is considerably more space for improvement. We will also outline our future goals in the next 6 months.
So I am your cyborg conservator, and museum conservators and their technologies are becoming more cyborg-like with every passing moment. I'm a conservator now, not because of my ability to cleverly restore the appearance of a damaged object, but because of my digital ability to detect the unseen properties of heritage materials and slow their rates of deterioration. So I help preserve cultural heritage digitally. Professionally, I am my 3D imaging systems, I am my multispectral imaging systems, and my molecular and atomic spectroscopy systems, as well as my knowledge and my experience and my hand skills. But almost every measurement I make today is a digital measurement and ends up creating a digital file. The information and knowledge I both need and create is now collected and digitized by machines, semantically structured with metadata about the context and chronologies of my work, my location, with keywords and concepts. For conservators, it's all happening in real time and we're barely prepared for it. We make observations, we conduct measurements, we create rich documentation that could, if truly quantitative and semantically linked, help improve the practices and knowledge of conservators and the public around the world in a truly archival body of conservation knowledge. But we remain oddly distracted by the novelty of all these technologies rather than the rich and nuanced information systems they represent. I'm now instantly interacting with populations of non-conservators via the website who can advance my work and improve my outcomes in ways that domain-bound knowledge never made possible. Imaging engineers, molecular spectroscopists, software engineers, artists, catastrophe scientists have all interacted with me over time. And at the edge of an age when anyone can soon access everything that is known about any subject anywhere on Earth, how might the role of the museum conservator, discovering, exploring, and preserving the world's cultural heritage, be shaped by our semantically linked audiences? What, if any audience, general as well as professional, could experience what I'm experiencing, discover what I'm discovering, and ponder my challenges in real time? And what if they could participate in my work? How would this alter the fundamental relationship between museums and conservators? So I'd love to say that we're going to put on Google Glasses or we're going to put on goggles, but we're going to take a real simple example to see how this might work. We're going to start with the example of the basic museum exhibition condition report as a starting point to see how this might work. Many attempts have been made to adopt digital technologies, digital image layers, annotation illustrations, in an attempt to speed the process of condition reporting. Speed, increasing productivity, getting more work done faster is a 19th century industrial age model. But is it necessarily what we really need in an information age? In many cases, registrars use a condition report simply as a checklist, making an inventory of everything's on that list, when what we're really interested in is discovering what has changed as a result of travel, handling, installation. So some of the current models only help registrars make more mistakes faster. Making work more valuable to more people, present and future, is an information age model. So making work multimedia, video, audio, three-dimensional, visual, interactive. Making work more shareable, more searchable, regardless of operating system, language, or decade. Allowing readers and users to link the work to associated work done earlier, to other objects in other museums, allowing users and audiences to discuss and annotate the work, expands and deepens the understanding of the work, and makes the work more valuable to more people across the span of time. So when a conservator creates a condition documentation, or when a registrar attempts to assess the deterioration of a work using that condition report, what gets in the way of making information more valuable in the digital age? Precision. So if an object has, or if a report has precision, then any number of examiners looking at the same information with the same surfaces using the same methods to assess and measure features will wind up, hopefully, with the exact same conclusions. That's the definition of precision. We'd also like to have accuracy. If the information has accuracy, then not only will any number of examiners wind up with the same conclusions, but those conclusions will accurately identify all the features in artwork that have changed as a result of travel and all those which have stayed the same with very low error and omission rates. And finally, what really makes it usable is metadata. Get through that. So metadata is the embedded information that makes all this machine searchable and makes systematic links meaningful. The geospatial, chronological, author, event, context, capture hardware, all those things that could be in every layer of that documentation, linking them all together. Oh, that's my last slide. Okay, so the other thing that we thought of, the last thing we sort of thought of was a universal coordinate system. And in a universal coordinate system, if we assigned every object as a three-dimensional model, so even a 2D work having a 3D model, and we applied Cartesian coordinates, then every location on that object, front, verso, sides, has a numerical value, and it will always have those numerical values if we make it a universal Cartesian system, so that regardless of whenever the object is examined and a condition is located, it's the exact same coordinates. And if we can embed those coordinate systems, we can coordinate damage, corrosion, abrasions over a long period of time and document them over time.
So as mentioned, over the past 5 months, Dale and I have been prototyping several ideas, and we're going to show you the live demo of one of these prototypes. I'd like to quickly acknowledge several colleagues from University of California who donated a few hours here and there over coffee or beer. And that's Amber, who's a second-year graduate student in computer science and gaming, and she works at Google. Emily, who's a third-year graduate student in computer science and education, and she works at the MIT Media Lab. And Daniel, who's an adjunct prof in the computer science department. So, demo time. So our first step was to make this information accessible and portable. Oops. So we decided to start with an iOS app. And basically what you do is you have a few options of paintings that have this information. You can open up a project, and you're first met with a video of Dale, as you can see here, explaining what this painting's about, the treatments that he's personally done on it, and any other information that someone might need to know, either a registrar or a community member, about a work of art. You then have many different views that you can view this artwork. So this is X-ray, this is UV, this is a still from an RTI, or reflective transformation imaging, which is the study of 2D surface geometry. And then with each different image overlaid on the painting, you have these pins that you can pop up information, this kind of chronological history around this particular point on the painting. So here's just a mock conversation between a registrar and a conservator. And each image has all of the metadata embedded in it. But more than just a reader, we also wanted to invite the public in to examine the artwork and maybe add their own annotations. So at the bottom, you can add any sort of text that you want to that particular pin, or add your own pin. You can also upload a picture from your photo gallery, or a picture, if you happen to be in front of the artwork, perhaps a picture that you take yourself.
So this becomes really important. If the registrar is on site, some distant site, examining work, and the registrar wonders if the condition has changed, if a crack has gotten larger, if paint has somehow changed in its appearance, they can take a picture of it or a video of it, and then begin an immediate sort of Google Hangout, immediate exchange with the conservator at a distance, but looking at the same area.
Yep. And then the idea is every time you connect to the Wi-Fi, all of this information will be linked in the DAMs and part of the object record. And what Dale was just talking about is down here, which I tried to fix last night, but it isn't working anymore. But this allows you to then pull up some sort of video chat, so you can talk in real time with a conservator if he or she is available. Oops. That's a quick look at the demo. So our next steps for this project in the next 6 months, we'll be looking at a few different things. So basically, we want to be able to increase precision by adding 3D models. So here's just an example of a little animation of a 3D model using photogrammetry. So photogrammetry, RTI is the study of 2D surface geometry. Photogrammetry is the study of 3D surface geometry. So instead of just using an XY grid for mapping these points on a 2D surface, using the XYZ coordinate system that will consistently identify every point, a group of points on any object, the location and size of an abrasion, loss, crack, or discoloration can be precisely defined and annotated in multiple views, measurements, and images, all correlated year after year to the same coordinate-defined area, which will be embedded in the metadata of those annotations. Another thing that we'll be thinking about is with all of this imaging and text, we have this vast and deep amount of enriched data, but are still viewing it in a large way, on a flat and linear way. The two-dimensional surface of an iPad or computer screen, for example, does not reference any sort of depth of information, lending itself to a particular type of communication. So how could new ways of seeing and retrieving large amounts of data to automatically classify, index, link, search, lead to new kinds of narratives? We will be experimenting with AR glasses, such as Meta space glasses, which allow for a more spatial and dynamic visualization of data flow. Using AR, we will consider. Yep, it just continues. Using AR, we will consider the painting as a type of raised relief map of information with peaks and valleys of data for each pin, data that could be organized chronologically, thematically, or in order of importance to the viewer, perhaps providing a more intuitive way to view this information.
Was that not an awesome assembly? I mean, that just, when she produced that, that just really blew my mind, because that's exactly what I'm looking for as a conservator, is hitting that point, getting access to all that information in chronological order from earliest to latest, and I can see how those conditions and those features of an artwork have changed. I can see the metadata, the location it was collected in. That was fabulous. So, okay, so why do I want to wear 3D glasses? And why do we need this carefully linked data? Well, as a conservator, I am interested primarily in change and managing change. Changes in objects occur, here comes the science, when the yield points of materials are exceeded by the energy loads being applied to them. Preceding a change in condition, there's almost always an identifiable energy input into the object, like handling, crating, transport, or environmental fluctuation, or the materials have aged to the point where they can no longer attenuate the static load. But either way, rate of change tells me a great deal about the stability and state of preservation of the object. So, for the past 85 years, conservators have been telling curators and directors that all the expensive scientific analyses that we've been insisting upon, together with the equally specialized care exercised by modern museum best practices, were effectively ensuring the preservation of their collections. But the truth is that we have very little data to back up those claims. While we've been repairing works continuously, conservators do not have a sophisticated assessment system to tell us whether we've done the job of actually slowing the rate of deterioration. We don't know what the rate of deterioration was or is now. The objects may look better, but there's very little quantitative data to suggest that they are indeed more stable. So, an automated system of condition documentation in which every new digital annotation about that perceived change on the surface of an object automatically builds a dynamic data set about the history and condition of that object can create that assessment program. When a change in the object is detected, whether the annotation is a photo or a video taken by a registrar or a visitor, a recorded conversation, or even data gathered by remote sensing, time and activity correlated information is being created that can yield documented rate of deterioration data. We can move literally to begin to dashboard changes per unit time for every object, and people could become more involved and interested in the preservation of their favorite collection objects. Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
So you've heard about our next step, and with Brinker's evolution of being able to 3D pull out the information and the possibility of going Cyborg with wearing goggles and really seeing very high resolution details, it really will empower both conservator and the on-site registrar to help establish very precisely and with great accuracy whether changes are taking place.
Questions for our cyborg conservators?
So I can
You
use
can
that
just
one.
use
Yeah.
that one. Yeah, here, I'll hand it to either of you.
So I was really fascinated by that, and I probably shouldn't be asking the first question. It should, but that reflects how fascinated I was by it. My background is in GIS and spatial analysis, and it seems to me like the treatments you're discussing for your 2D artwork surfaces and the change analysis over time and the Cartesian referencing of those changes on the image surface is exactly what GIS analysts are doing all the time on remote sensing data. So we have multiple data sets of remotely sensed images over time. We do things like environmental habitat mapping,
Right.
which is just pixel analysis on a Cartesian plane
Exactly.
of an image. And I think if you were to import high-resolution imagery of these artworks into a GIS package and run them through some of the same spatial analytics techniques that we use for habitat mapping, you'd be able to, and you had multiple layers of change over time, or even multi-band images. We found multi-band. Yep. I think you'd get some really interesting automated results on damage and change over time.
He completely got the presentation. This is outstanding. I've never felt so validated in my life. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly the model that we're following.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to deliver
Yeah,
this.
take that one. We can go sit down.
So I really appreciate this presentation also. I mean, I'm in the field of computer science, and I'd love to help you make this happen. I mean, I think it's just the way that all this information should be organized and accessed. My question is, on the other hand, it feels a little bit bottom up, and I understand that because you're a curator and you're interested in this really low level information. But there was you did suggest that this was supposed to be also made available to the public. So I was wondering if you could just sort of turn it around. Take it top down. What would a catalog for a museum exhibition potentially look like, given everything that you know, because you have access to all this information that's available? What would that catalog potentially look like in the future to a person if it was to become an electronic document that takes advantage of all this?
Man, I am totally transparent today. People are reading my mind. It's fabulous. So I don't know how many of you were at MCN's or museums in the Web Seattle, or was it MCN Seattle? Yeah, and saw Curtis Wong's presentation of the worldwide his what's it called, Worldwide Universe application, but it is a visual way of allowing access and exploration of a very granular kind of information. So I can actually imagine exactly the kind of catalog you want. So maybe the catalog opens up with portraits of Georgia O'Keeffe at different times in her life, and you can then move through that timeline and see where she is and what she's writing and what she's painting and what she's drawing. And then once you're in a painting, you can become even more granular, traveling through time and space and science, and see the materials and see the pigments and the amendments and the canvas, and begin to see the analysis, where it's traveled over time, how many different owners it had. So I think that a rich narrative, multimedia, interactive catalog is exactly where this can all go.
Next.
Thank you. I just want to carry that conversation forward a little bit. I've actually done print augmentation so that you can scan it and have some sort of interactive experience. And I wonder, where do you think the audience is in reception on that?
So in terms of the audience being ready for augmented reality, Miriam, can you pass the microphone back for just a second? I just want to make sure I understand that.
Yes, without too much self-promotion, we have a layer app enhanced piece downstairs right now, and I haven't seen a lot of people scanning at this event. So I'm just wondering what you think the general public reception is. Are they ready for that?
I mean, my perception, I mean, you all probably know this better than I do because you really work with visitor services, visitor interaction, and assessment. I'm not even sure that the conservation and conservation science community is quite ready for that, but I ultimately think that's exactly the trajectory we're on. So I'm trying to get out in front of that a little bit. I also want my registrars to be able to access better information and increase their precision, because from registrar to registrar, the same object going to multiple venues being looked at, different people get entirely different condition reports. And some people are just plain intimidated by the complexity of a surface, and they just look at the frame. And things are happening with the painting that we could be in real-time dialogue about. So I'm trying to sort of solve that problem. And one way of getting better accuracy and precision out of people is to give them more multimedia access. Instead of them trying to read narrative, literally give them photogrammetry, give them a 3D image, give them an RTI with a video backup, and let them see what I'm seeing and then see if it's the same thing. And I think we can do better work more quickly with fewer mistakes. So that's my goal. And then, yeah, you're right. The public is probably a decade behind us there.
Any more questions? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. We have a few minutes left. I'm going to ask the panelists to stay seated and encourage you all to approach them directly. One more round of applause for our fabulous panel. Thank you.